Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Fred Russo, and we're going to talk about his research and where his family is from. So, welcome, Fred. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. So, my first question, I kind of always ask everybody the same first question is, where's your family from?
My dad actually is from a small town east of Naples called Marcianise. My grandfather actually came to New Haven, Connecticut in 1903, brought my grandmother over in 1910, and my father was actually born in New Haven, Connecticut. But 3 months after his birth, his dad died. His mother packed him up, young woman, moved back to Italy. And so, although he was born as an American citizen, he was raised as an Italian and came back to the United States as a immigrant American.
Yeah, so you're the second person I've heard a story similar to that, where they had come over and the parent was born here and then they went back. So how old was he when he came back?
Well, he was 14 years old. What had happened was my grandfather, who passed away, my dad's father, also came to this country with his brother. His brother remained and was probably 15 miles away. But in 1903, 15 miles away was like 1,500 miles
Yeah,
away.
right.
And there was no way for my grandmother to be, connected to her brother in law. And so that's why she went back to Italy to live with her family and help support her son. Well, my uncle, Giuseppe, Joe, but Uncle Giuseppe needed some help on the farm. He had a little farm here in Hamden, Connecticut, just outside of New Haven. He wrote to my grandmother and said, "Send Domenico back to the country. I could use him here." And I'm sure my grandmother, the times being what they were, said, one less mouth to feed. And she put him on a boat by himself. I'm sure there was somebody with him, but basically there were no relatives with him. Put him on a boat, came here, and my uncle picked him up at Ellis Island, and he always remained. He did go back later on when he was older in his later years to visit his mom just before she died, but it took 30 or 40 years for that first trip that happened. So, as I said, my dad, even though he was American, spoke with an Italian accent, was bilingual, but he got caught up because he never went to school in Italy and he never went to school in the United States. Couldn't either read nor write, and it made it very difficult for him. And I always give my mom credit for being his kind of ears and eyes to being in business because she was the one who could read and write.
Wow, so that's quite an interesting story. And yeah, I know, my uncle was left behind when my grandparents came over, and they intended to go back, but they didn't. And same thing with him. He quit school when he was 7 in Italy, but he did. I don't know if the kids taught him. I mean, he did eventually, learn how to. As far as I know, write. I don't know, but I don't know. It's a good point. I don't know if he was ever able to read.
And when I was I'm 77 years old, but when I was 55, I it kind of dawned on me. You're married, you're raising a family, you're sending kids to school, college. When all that kind of smoke cleared, I started to think about, what about my dad's family? My mother's family knew was documented, but my father's family, we knew very little about it. As a matter of fact, when we were kids, my mother would make care packages up. Really, I have two brothers and a sister, and and even though we handed our clothes down from brother to brother, at our own, when the clothes were worn out, we actually packed them up. We sent them to Italy. Well, we didn't know where Italy was. I mean, Italy could have been, around the corner. It could have been, on the top of the world. But all the clothing that we had went in the box. In Marcianise, we had no idea what that was. Well, there were things that we knew that my grandmother liked, and I'm sure my father must either, sure my mother wrote her or whatever. But they would always include peanut butter, chocolate, and hot dogs, believe it or not. They used to sell hot dogs and almost like a beer stein, kind of locked in gelatin with a cover on it. And it was the strangest thing. I mean, but all this stuff went there, and we never saw it again. That was the end of it, you know. So as we get into this interview, I'll tell you sort of a follow up, all those clothes and who they went to. But because in my life, I decided to do this research, and I not only did my research for my dad, I loved it so much that I do it for a lot of other people, but I do it for free. I don't charge anybody to do any research. I spend hours and hours and hours doing it. I absolutely love enjoying it. I am retired, so I don't have any time constraints, and the joy that I got out of learning about my dad, his family, where he came from, the town he was from, and Italy in general, made me feel so good. I said, if there's somebody out there that doesn't know where their roots are from, they need to have that same joy. They need to know, and I've seen it so many times. I've probably done 50 research projects where the people were in tears. They want to pay me. I don't want any money for it. I consider it an act of love that everybody should know where their roots are from if they really want to know. And so for me, I did it on my own. At the very end, I needed help from a genealogist, although I'm a genealogist now myself. But I needed help from a genealogist to do some Italian research. And we were able to research our family all the way back to 17 something. Near trying to get the name of the records. But before Italy was unified, from once they were unified, you can get records. Prior to that, you had to go to church. So, well, anyway, she got that information for me. So I almost felt whole having that experience of knowing who my dad's family was, at least by name, and the roots and how far back. And we saw in the 1800s, our name went from Russo to Rossi, back to Russo again. Little things that you would never know unless you do that kind of research. And so once you start that, and again, I speak for myself, I wasn't satisfied. It sounds crazy. I was happy that I found all the information. Now I had to see it. I had to go there. I had to discover it. And I had a woman who runs a travel agency. She's Italian. And she said to me, you're getting all excited about going to Italy. You better calm down a little bit. She said, because when you get there, you might be disappointed. I said, what do you mean? I'm thinking she said to me, Fred, the last time, in our conversation, there was any communication with your family was 50 years ago. When your grandmother was alive, she's passed. My dad did have two sisters with my grandmother's second marriage. I have no idea who she is. I don't even know what their names were, as a matter of fact. And when I tell you about the care packages, that's who they went to. They went to the children of my father's two sisters. So the travel agency, in her wisdom, said to me, listen, do yourself a favor. Book yourself. It was my wife at the time was alive. She's passed, but book a trip to Italy and do a tour. If you do nothing else in going to Italy, at least you've gone around and you saw all the high spots of Italy. So, okay. And then what we'll do is the last few days of your trip, you drop off from the tour itself and go find your family if you can find them. I happen to be very lucky because my son-in-law's parents are from Italy. He was born here, but they go to Italy every summer. And all the planets were in alignment. And my son-in-law's father said, hey, I'm going to be there at the time. I'm not that far from Marcianise. Why don't you stay with me? And then we'll take a ride in, and me and your wife will take a ride into Marcianise to see if we can find your family. I did have an address, believe it or not. I got it from the daughter of my Uncle Giuseppe. She was 92 years old at the time, early stages of dementia. And I went to her house, and I said to her, name was Giovanna, but we called her Jenny. I said, Jenny, I don't know if you remember me. Dominic's son. I said, I want to go to Italy. And I want to find, it's her family too. Her father and my grandfather were brothers. I said, I want to find her family there. She said, Fred, I haven't written your family since your grandmother died. Your aunts, I don't know if they're alive or they're dead. I don't know who's there or where they live. Well, when you wrote, where did you write to? She said, I got a book near my telephone, the old phone things. And she said to me, I think their name and their number is here. So of course I'm looking for Russo, not knowing that my grandmother. I knew my grandmother got remarried. I knew at that point. Her last name now was DeSanto. And so I'm looking for Russo, can't find it. No, it's not Russo, it's another name. And she finally comes up with it. And I look it up and I get the address. It's 3 Via Vivaldi. That's the street they live in on Marcianise. So I'm armed with an address. I don't know who I'm going to find. Maybe nobody, maybe good people, maybe hostile people. But I went there with my wife and my son-in-law's father, Dominic. And, it's interesting. You go through these towns and they're small. You ask people where things are. They don't know where they are. Hey, can you tell me where people? Yeah, go to the left, go to the right. Go to the right, go to the left. It took us probably an hour to find it. Town's not that big. We finally found the street. Can't park a car on it. It's too narrow. You got to park it kind of far away and walk to it, which we did. And I said to my wife, here's what I want to do. I'll be so satisfied if I find the building that my dad was raised in. I'll be satisfied if somewhere's in the town I can get soil. I brought a Ziploc bag. I want to dig some soil up from Marcianise. I want to bring that home with me. I want to bring some of Marcianise back with me. I want to take a picture in front of the building. If I get those 3 things done, I will be very, very happy. So I'm standing against the building, with my hand on it, and an elderly woman comes from up on one of the balconies. And admittedly, everybody's got little balconies to hang
Hmm.
their laundry out on. And she said to me in Italian, who are we looking for? Now, in these little towns and these little neighborhoods, everybody knows everybody. They know who you are, and they know you don't belong. Okay? But she wasn't mean, but you want to know who I was. And I didn't know what to really say to her. So in Italian, I said, I'm Dominic Russo's son from America. I figured Dominic Russo, America, if that didn't make a connection, then I had to leave. She just looked at me, never said a word, walked back into her apartment. I said to my wife, what do you think that means? I don't know. Maybe she just was whatever. 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, I see people walking from every direction on the main street, the side street, coming there. And there was probably, without a doubt, 35 people standing in the street crying, hugging, kissing, speaking Italian. They speak zero English, no English at all. I can speak some Italian to get by, but I'm not fluent like my dad was, let's say. But anyway, we were there, and I cried. I hugged him. I kissed him. And needless to say, once you, I was so happy because my friend, the travel agent, said, Fred, you may get there, and there's not going to be anybody there. They're all gone. That was possible. He said, you can get there, and they can say, hey, I've been around for 50 years. You show up, and all of a sudden, what are we going to do? Open our arms up to you? Or the third is they're going to hug you, and they're going to embrace you. And that's what happened with me. So, needless to say, we had 3 days left. They never let us go home. We stayed there. We met everybody. We went to everybody's house, their apartments. We ate at everybody's house, or drank, or had coffee, or had dessert, or had something. And it's every night. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm saying, I have to go home. I go to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock. I said, I can't keep my eyes open. Oh, no, 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 no. You got to stay. You got to stay. They would drive us back to our apartment. 7 o'clock the next morning, they were there again. We're visiting cemeteries, seeing where my grandmother is buried, where my grandfather is buried. It was as crazy as a time that I could never imagine. I got everybody's name, everybody's phone number, and name. I had first cousins, second cousins, and third cousins there. And that family is so tight. And the kind of interesting part is my 2 aunts, they married 2 men, not related, both named Nicola Cirillo. So everybody in the family, if you're a male, your name is Nicola.
Yeah,
If you're
right. I know the drill.
if you're if you're a woman, your name is Carmela. So I don't have to know anybody's name but Nicola and Carmela. It was, but and with we started with now with Facebook, but we are in touch all the time, every week, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I've been to Italy since 2002. I've been there 6 times to visit them, stay with them. Well, we always try travel as well, but I try to spend at least a week with them and connect with them. And I would just say it's about, for me, that has been probably the highlight of my life. I really mean that. I mean, there are a lot of things that have happened that have been good, business wise, I made money and stuff, but this to me was the greatest connection that I could make. It was just, it's hard to explain it if you, it was cathartic. That's all I can say. It was cathartic. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I enjoy it. I have I have 3 daughters, and they've all been to Italy. They've all visited the family, and it's like 1903. My grandfather comes over from Italy, and here we are in 2000, almost 23, and we're talking about the same family being together. It just was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I know, and it's funny you mentioned about sending the packages back. I know my mom's mom used to send money to Pari in Torito, and I just learned recently. I mean, I just found a first cousin once removed. Second cousin, I suppose. He is the grandson of my grandmother's half sister. When my great grandmother passed away, she was very young. She was 40, and my great grandfather married a woman half his age. He was 60, she was 30,
Yeah, not unusual.
and and she had 2 children, 2 daughters. And I mean, out of the blue, somebody must have told him about me, and I was looking for family. But I get this message on Facebook, and he tells me who he is and everything. And I said, because I'm putting him in my tree and all of that kind of stuff because I never knew he existed. So I said to him, I said, do you have any photos? I always like to see photos. And he says, I think my father had some. I'm going to look. Well, he had photographs of all my grandmother's brothers
Oh my
that
god,
nobody had ever seen.
unbelievable!
Most people go to Italy and they want to go to Rome, and that's great. You have to go to Rome and stuff like that. But to me, meeting the family and walking the streets where your grandparents, great grandparents, great great grandparents walked. There's nothing better than that.
The culture is just, it's just so unbelievable that you could, if you're fortunate enough to be able to tap into that, there's no other experience like it. It just isn't. It's
And,
when I
and
was,
they're just as interested in us as we are in them.
well, Bob, was interesting because the very first time that I made contact with my cousins, and they're my first cousins. They're not like distant. They're my first cousins. They're
Yeah,
my
that's
aunt's
close.
children. My cousin Pasquale said, I was talking with my wife just a week or so ago, and he said to me, I said to her, I wonder if we'll ever meet our family from America. All those years that passed, and I'm thinking he still had a thought about his family in America. He says, and then you show up. He said, it's like, I can't believe it's like a miracle. His brother, the youngest, there's 5 brothers in one family. The youngest one, Domenico, called Mimi, um, he said to me, Fred, my brother Angelo passed away 6 months ago. You look just like him. And I do. He said, when you showed up, we thought Angelo came back from the dead. He said, we couldn't believe he's a big guy like you. He said, same face ring, the hair, and everything else. He said, we thought my brother Angelo came back. He says, so now they call me Fratellone, which is big brother, not just brother, Fratellone, but the big brother. I'm the oldest of all my cousins, and even their children, who are probably in their 30s and maybe even 40s, they call me Zio out of respect. I'm really a
Yeah, yeah.
Gugino, not a Zio, but they call me Zio, and it's just they won't let me when I'm there. I have to be far enough away so they can't get me because I'm close enough. They grab me. I have to stay with them. They will not let me stay anywhere else. I said to them, look, you can get me a room in the town. I'm happy to, no, 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 no. You got to stay with us. And then what happens when you stay with them? You go through their daily routines, which is go buy the bread, go get the vegetables. But it's one thing here. There's no big stores. You go down an alleyway. Some guy's got stuff in his backyard. He's selling, bartering stuff, whatever. but it really it was kind of funny. You mentioned our photos. When I got there, one of the things they took out was their photo albums, and they had pictures of my mom and dad when they went to the 50s. And I'm thinking, here I am in Italy. Here I am in Marcianise. They have photos of my mom and dad that I don't
Hmm.
have, just like you
Yeah,
said,
yeah, yeah.
of when they were young, a young couple, and it was just I don't know. You know, what I've asked them to do, I haven't done it. They haven't done it yet, but I said, you got to get me those pictures. Even you take pictures of it and send it through over our iPhone because they've got stuff. And my, one year my father had an old Cadillac and he brought it over there on the boat. He went over on the Independence, I think it was, and I didn't realize why. But as a kid, I remember filling it with wood, nails, hammer, screening. Screens on their windows. Bugs would be in and out all the time. So he made screens when he was there. It just all I know is some of the most basic things that we take for granted. They don't have it. Now, much better. But when they were kids growing up, and there was, and I think one last quick story when we were older, when I say older, I was in college. My father had on his office desk a bank, and the bottom of the bank was round. If you turned it one way, it was a man in a top hat, tuxedo, vest, tie, and a big pot belly. But when you turned it around, it showed and it said before taxes. When you turned it around, it was the same guy's face, no hat, and instead of the pot belly, he had a barrel around him. Remember the old days they wear a barrel. So I remember as a joke to my father, because whenever my dad went to Italy, and most times he went by himself, my mother really wasn't crazy about the accommodations, quite honestly. But when he would go there, even his eyeglasses he left there, eyeglasses, his suitcases, all his clothes. He came back with just the clothing on his back. He'll leave it for them to have better clothing, or whatever. So we took the little bank, we scratched out before taxes, and we scratched out after taxes. We put down before Italy and after Italy.
It's funny. Well, my mom's brother, he didn't come over till 1950, and then he had to go to Canada. But they there was no they had a house. They actually owned their own house, which was left from my great grandfather. Um, House. It was two rooms. There was a bedroom and a living room, family room,
Yes,
kitchen, fireplace.
yeah,
No bathroom. We're
that's
talking
right.
1950. There's no bathroom.
That's right.
There was a house in the backyard or whatever there was. You know, People don't realize that 50s, 60s, people, 70s probably even people were living like this. Um,
It wasn't that. I mean, the 50s, you weren't that far from the end of the war in Europe. You know what I mean? So,
no, no, and I actually my cousin Mary is boy, I guess she's 90 or 91 now. And so she was about um, 12 or 13 when the war ended. So she remembers. She remembers the Germans
sure,
in the town. She remembers the Americans and British coming. And
sure,
and Body wasn't in the war per se as much as the Naples and Rome and places like that. But they still had troops there and everything. And she said we ate beans. That's what we ate. We ate
yeah,
beans.
yes,
Maybe once in a while they would have a goat or a sheep or something, but and then she said they would, live off the black market. She
yes.
was a black marketeer when she was 12 or 13.
Listen, they did what they had to do to survive.
Yeah, of course, of
It
course.
wasn't as easy. Look, I think what happens often is that when we hear stories of Italy, just like you said, you think of Rome, you think of Venice, you think of all these. But let me tell you, there were a lot of people in between that suffered quite a bit. Just did not have an awful lot to share than they did. And as I said, I think with my grandmother made a kind of strategic decision that listen, with one less mouth to feed, send them over there. Like, and that she loved my dad, but I mean, it made her life easier only having the two kids
Yeah,
instead of three.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And like I said, my grandmother here used to say, and I never knew. I learned this from this guy a month ago. My dad's mom used to send clothes and stuff over to Italy to her half sisters, and there was never any mention of these half sisters. Nobody ever talked about it. My father never talked about it. My grandmother died when I was about 10 or 11, so who would even think to ask,
Yes.
Um, but yeah, nobody ever talked about the family over there, and I found out because my grandmother's name Piomalo. There's only one family with Piomalo. That's
Yeah. Not
you
many,
know,
huh?
uh, and because of her background, you know, that's the family. And when I finally found the fourth cousin, and we started putting all the pieces together, she was like my on-site genealogist. I would find another Piomalo. Who's this? Who's this? Whose son is this? Who's the?
Everybody thinks that the record keeping, for example, was very,
Oh,
very
it's
good back then.
horrible.
Oh,
That's
terrible.
horrible.
Yeah. I mean, when I do my research stuff, I always have a disclaimer page saying, look, you're going to get documentation here. I have to make copies or I can make copies that the dates don't match up, but it's the same person. They
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
on or about is good enough. I said, what's the difference if they're born in 1864 or 1861? It's irrelevant. They were born around that time, and one document got it right and one got it wrong, or maybe both of them got it wrong. It is what it is. But it drives me crazy. The research that I do now, I prefer to do Italian research only because I'm familiar with the language, I'm familiar with the culture, I'm familiar with the country, the little towns, and it makes it easier for me. I did one though for my best friend, who's Ukrainian, of all things. That was the war there, and what I had to do before I could do any research for him was I had to do some research on the history of the Ukraine. Ukraine was not always a country in and of itself; it was a
Right.
region.
Hmm.
And sometimes Poland owned it, and sometimes Russia owned it, and sometimes Germany owned it, and Hungary owned it rather. And I'm looking at one document, especially like with census. Well, we're from Poland in 1910. We're from Ukraine in 1920. It just then once I did the research, then it dawned on me how this was all going. But you're right. Sometimes trying to figure out those little details, they could drive you crazy.
Yeah, and there was a place in France. I don't know if I read it, saw it on TV. I forget how I found this out, but there was a place in France that when the Germans came in, they gave the people a choice. If they stayed, they had to become German. But if they wanted to be French, they had to leave the town. They had to go.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
And it was one of those towns on the border that changed hands,
Yeah,
back and forth and back and forth. But my cousins told me, my cousins that were born in Italy, told me that they would send the kids to the comune to say that the baby was born.
sure,
7, 8 years old.
sure.
So to your point, the date could be wrong, the name could be wrong, the
It's
house could
funny.
be, the address could be wrong, anything could be wrong.
They don't care either, by the way. It doesn't
No,
matter.
no, no.
It's uh, my cousin said to me, I thought it was funny. He said, Fred, you've seen more of Italy than we have.
Yeah, see?
He said, I mean, I've been on, I think, three different tours. I went to up north. I did the central, and I did the southern one. I never got to Sicily. That's where I want to go next. Everybody says that is beautiful, beautiful country. And the Sicilians, they don't consider themselves Italians first.
No, that's
They're
right. No, that's
Sicilians
right. They're
first,
Sicilians.
and
That's
you can
right.
call them Italians if you want. Good luck with that. But that doesn't work out that well all the time. But that's another place I would really like to see. I was at a wake and then a funeral, and they had an after funeral luncheon, and there's a woman sitting at the table, and she is the sister-in-law of my best friend. So we're talking about family and where we're from and everything else. And her last name is Gen X, Genex. I said, I'm Italian. I said, impossible. I said, there's not even an X in the Italian language. I don't know how you can call your last name. No, I'm Italian. She's friend. My father came over 1920 something, Gen X. And where did he come from? He comes from Sicily. He said, hey, I've never done a lot of research in Sicily. So do me a favor. If you get a chance, send me any information that you have about your background, grandfather, whatever. But I got to find that in Gen X. And so I start doing the research, and sure enough, everything she said was true. I got them on the boat and everything else. So I always like to go back to the town that they're from, if I can find it, which I did in this case, and look up the name in the white pages, the Gina Bianca, if they're there. And sure enough, there's like 6 Gen X's still living there. And I'm scratching my head. What is going on? Why would anybody get named Gen X? So that Sunday, I'm in church. The priest turns his back, and on his vestments, he's got a P and an X. It's Greek. The Greeks at one time, I believe, occupied Sicily,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
somewhere along the line, that name Gen X is probably a Greek name and not a true Italian or Sicilian name, and that's how it got the way it did. But it's interesting how you stumble into answers sometimes. It's not written anywhere, but you just have to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, so the X at the end, that's a very interesting story because my uh, we always had a person. Again, we called her Aunt Beatrice. I maybe met her once or twice when I was a kid, but she was my father's, I guess, second cousin. But that's a thing in Italy. If older cousins, they give you the Zio or the Zia,
That's
right?
right.
Um, so we always called her Aunt Beatrice, but her last name or her husband's last name was Ptex, Petix, from
Yeah,
Sicily.
yeah, yeah.
Same thing, right? So now I had never heard of Gen X, and I always, when I started hearing about that and hearing that name, I always said the same thing. How could that be Italian? There's no X in the Italian language. um, so what wound up happening was I got a message from on Ancestry from um, my cousin Linda. She's a fourth cousin, and she said, "I think we're researching the same person, Maria Piomalo. I think we might be related." And I said, "We're definitely related because there's only one family, and I know
Right.
Maria Piomalo is my great grandfather's sister." Um, so, she did Ancestry, and we confirmed all of that. And her mom, Aunt Beatrice, married this Pete Ptex. And to your point about pictures and all of that, she had pictures of my dad's family from the 20s. Now, we never knew about each other,
Sure.
right? So she's got pictures. Her 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 aunt, um, Josephine, was best friends with my cousin Nancy. They basically grew up together, not that far away. Uh, she also worked in my grandfather's and my great uncle's embroidery shop in New York City, and she had beads from this shop that her grandmother saved.
Well, beautiful.
So we finally got to meet a few years ago, and she came with beads from my sister and myself and my cousin and the family, because there was nobody else here. It was just my grandmother and her aunt, the only two people that came from that family to America. They were intertwined, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. We never knew each other, and I said to her, I said, Linda, I said, I now remember when I moved into my cousin Louise's apartment in Flushing. We were driving down. I remember this street, Booth Memorial Avenue, and my father saying, "That's where Aunt Beatrice lives." Pointed out a house. That's where her aunt's family grew up. Her cousin and everything grew up in the house. She used to go there every summer. Um, I moved in 5 blocks away from that house. Lived there for like 5 years. Uh, we probably passed each other on the street
Never know.
and never knew. And now we're talking 50 years later through Ancestry and Facebook. We're connected.
You believe in coincidence? I don't.
No, 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 no,
I
no,
don't believe in
absolutely
coincidence.
not. No.
No way.
And I've heard so many stories. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, some of what ones one's more incredible than the next one. And the same thing with you, right? You know, where somebody just said we were just talking about the American cousins, and then
Sure.
you
Well, Bob, you know what
you went
I
off.
do? I am an avid reader, and I love writing. So it on Facebook, on my own personal page, I have one called "As I Was Saying" by Fred Russo. I post uh, uh, short essays, 800-900 word essays, and they're just recollections of either me growing up or something with my family, and that's not be about me personally. I mean, just things that crossed my path as a little young Italian kid growing up in an Italian neighborhood. And my intention, I probably have maybe 100 of these stories, maybe more. Um, my intention is to have them go down for like a Staples, have them printed up and bound to give to my kids. And I want to give it to them. It's not quite a diary. It's more than a diary, but it's my reflections on a variety of topics that you know what they or their children, when I'm going to look and say, oh my God, dad thought about this or dad was talking about this, whatever. I got when we had COVID, I ended up writing a book, and it was based upon my experience as a young guy growing up in the Italian family neighborhood. Not all of it's true. My main character is a young Italian guy in his mid 30s who was born out of wedlock, and he lived with his mom, his grandmother, and grandfather, who were from the other side. His mom got pregnant when she was in high school, and he was born and he was raised by the grandparents. The mother died when she was like in her 20s, and the whole story basically is about. He says, "I'm all alone. I don't have a mom. I don't have my grandparents. I don't have anybody." And then because his grandparents and mom were so good to him, he never really gave a lot of thought about who his biological father was. And that's what the story is about. How he does have someone related, really related to him by blood, and he doesn't know who it is. And that's the story, the quest to find his father. And he treks all over the place, and he gets a girlfriend in this part of the story, and he ends up in Italy. And he finally does find his father. And he finds his father's kind of well to do, never been married, and he finds out his father was heartbroken because the grandfather, unbeknownst to him, never allowed his mother to get married. The guy wanted to. He's a smart guy. He said, "Look, I'm going to work. I'm going to do whatever I got to do." But the grandfather was so offended that his daughter got pregnant that he completely excluded this guy from his life. He said, "Listen, my father went back to Italy. I went back to Italy with him, and now here I am. I'm a lawyer. This young guy is a lawyer too, and now he's got to make a decision between staying in Italy because he has nobody in the United States, except this young girl that he met, he likes, or go back to the United States and not see his father, now that he's found him." And when it's all said and done, he tells his father his dilemma. And the father said, "Listen, that's up to you. Whatever you decide, you have to decide." And he ponders it all night long in his hotel. And he says to the father the next day, "I'm going back." He said, "You know what?" And the name of the book is called Follow Your Heart. He said, "I love this girl." He said, the father said, "I would be disappointed if you didn't go back. You can always see me. We can always communicate. There's all kinds of ways to do that." But he says, "I didn't do that with your mother. I didn't fight hard enough. I should have. I never did." And the guy comes home, and what he did when he gave his father, that was one of the clues he used to find who his father was. He found his mother's jewelry box, a high school graduation ring. He knew his mother never graduated. He looks inside, he sees the initials, he goes to the library, he gets the yearbooks, and he finally links who the father is. But the guy's not around because he didn't, unbeknownst to him, he moved to Italy, and he through his church he finds someone who was related to his father's family, and gets a little lowdown on him. He's an old uncle, and this guy had his biological has an uncle in the nursing home. He talks to him. He says, "Yeah, this is where he went. This is where he's from. You got to go there, and maybe you can find him." And he does. And when he goes there, he gives his father the graduation ring that he gave to his mother when they were in high school. They're like, boyfriend, girlfriend. And when he left the following day, the father said, "Here, I got to give you this back." And he gives him the ring box with the ring in it. And he was kind of disappointed. He said, "Gee, I thought this would be something my father would, a great link between our past and our future." Da, da, da. And when he gets home, what he finds out is it's the ring that he was going to give his mother. The father was going to give his mother, and
Mhm.
he loves the girl that he's with. And he said, "You know what? I'm not going to lose you. Like my father lost my mother." Puts the ring on her finger and says, "I want you to marry me." And that's how the story ends.
Ah, that's a good story.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but all the little inferences of Italy, the town, the people, they're all my cousins. They think they're celebrity. Yeah, it was, it's funny how if someone told me I would go down this path of genealogy, I always liked researching. I taught science when I first got out of college, and ended up leaving teaching to take my dad's business over because he was. We didn't know he was terminally ill. He knew it. We didn't know it till later on, and then by that time, my mom, she was 8 years younger than my dad, and all she ever did was raise a family, be a wife, to help my dad with the business. We didn't know what to do with her. Quite honestly, we were not going to put her off the pasture. So I said, "Look, I'll run the business, Mom. Hang in there, do what you're doing, and we'll keep it going." But she passed away 3 years later, and that stage again, I said, "Should I stay? Should I go back to teaching?" I don't know. My father loved the roofing business. It was his heart. It's something that he felt that he came from the other side. He was farming. He hated farming. Right? I mean, he met a guy while he was at the farm market who was a roofer, and the guy said, "Come on, you got to help me put roofs on." My friends, anything's got to be better than farming. He ended up becoming a roofer and opened up his own business, and he had it for 45 years. To see him um, to see the business just go under because he wasn't there, I couldn't
Mm.
do it. So I ran it for 40 years. And I have a son-in-law and my daughter who lived next door to me. He now runs it for the last 10 years. So it's been an interesting history, even with the roofing company that's in the family. Some things you just don't want to let go. That's
Yeah,
how I am.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I could understand that, and it's something that my cousin, they had an oil business, oil delivery business for like 80 years or something like that in Corona, and it's went from one to the other, which is pretty neat if you have
Yeah.
that
Well,
business.
I will just tell you this: each subsequent generation, it's more difficult for that generation to be successful with the business. When you have nothing, you can't go. There's nowhere to fail. You
Yeah,
know. But when you get up a level, I remember. I think my scariest time was I said to myself, "Here I am. I'm a college educated guy. I have a master's degree. I taught school for 5 years. My dad, no reading, no writing, no education, no anything, and he ran a successful business for 45 years. I'm thinking to myself, can I do this? Am I capable of at least mirroring what he did?" And I'll tell you something. I was scared that first year or two that I would not be able to have whatever it took. He had it without the education. For me, it should have been a cakewalk. I was so scared. But like everything else, one day at a time, one day at a time, one day, you're consistent with it, and it all kind of works out for you, I guess. But yeah, it's I love our family and our family history, and any kind of a document that I can get. I don't. I'm right to this day because there's always something new coming online with
yeah.
websites and
Mhm.
stuff. You can dig information up, and I do, and I have a huge booklet of information from our family. It probably doesn't mean much to anything to my own kids, but if it means something to them, I would be very happy. How did you get into the genealogy business?
Well, what started me was I had my great grandfather's. I call it his calling card. It had his name on it, and it had the crest, and it said from the Dukes of Capricotta in Italian, of course.
Yeah,
And my grandmother had brought a box of these with her when she had come over, and it was in the photo album. And my mother would always tell me that your grandmother's father, and he was a duke or a count, or blah blah blah. So that's kind of where I started. Little did I know that my great grandmother was even more connected than he was. She,
really,
her family's Caracciolo, and I've traced my direct line back to 950 in Naples.
really.
Well, because it's all documented.
Yes, yes.
Because in the Libro di Oro, the whole family is there.
It's hard sometimes to put in words what you see and what you feel.
Yeah,
But I tell you, when I go back, I'm always overwhelmed. I just am. I am just so grateful And as I said, I don't believe in coincidence. I think that I always believe that my dad looks over us, and me especially,
Yeah.
and wanted it this way. And I think someone asked me one day about, at my age, what do you think is your greatest accomplishment? I've done a lot. I don't say great things. I've done good things in business and have had a successful raised a successful family with my wife. But I would say I would consider one of my kind of crowning achievements is making that connection back with our family in Italy. You can't put a price on that. Just, it is what
No,
it
no,
is.
no. And it's not easy.
No, no. And that what I didn't realize, and I mentioned this earlier, is that what the travel lady said to me. She said to me, Fred, what makes you think they're going to accept you when you get there? Don't be disappointed if they say, "What do we care?" Or they kind of want to shake you down because you're an American. But I would just tell you this, Bob, and I speak for my family only that I know of. They love the fact that they have American relatives. They
Yeah.
absolutely love the fact. I went to a wedding. My cousin Domenico's son Batista got married, and he said to me, I was there during one summer, and he said to me, "If I send you an invitation, will you come to my son's wedding?" I said, "Sure, I'll come to your wedding." I never thought you send me an invitation. Quite honestly, I thought you did it as a courtesy. Sure enough, the invitation arrives. It's in December, no less, a week or two before Christmas. And their temperatures is better. It's more like North Carolina temperature than Connecticut temperature. So I went there. I went to the wedding, and I'm going to tell you something. I was like a trophy. This is my cousin from America. This is my cousin from America. This is my cousin. So one guy says to me, "Yeah," he says to me, jokingly, he said, "You're not Italian." He said, "You weren't born here." Well, I have a tattoo on my chest of the Italian flag, and underneath it says Marcianise. Okay, I put my shirt like this and said, "Where's your tattoo? Where's the tattoo that says you're an Italian?" Okay, so yeah, I had him covered. I really did, but it was. I just love going there. I love going.
I, and the first time we went there, well, the only time so far, but it was still 25 years ago, and we were in Sorrento, and we were walking through the town, and I see the butcher shop, and it says Sorrentino on it, and so. I'm taking a picture of the sign. Here's Sorrentino
There.
in Sorrento, right? Uh, and the owner comes out and he's talking to me in Italian, and I don't know hardly any Italian, but I knew enough that he was asking me, "Who are you?" Right? That I knew.
Yeah,
So I said, "Sorrentino, America," and he kind of wasn't understanding. So I took out my license and I showed him
yeah.
Sorrentino. So he says, Ashbed, Ashbed.
Uh,
And he goes running into the place next door. And he comes out with a guy who speaks English.
oh,
And now this is out of the blue, right?
yeah.
He wants to know who you are and where your family was from, and this is just a
Oh,
stranger butcher. I'm taking a picture of his
they
son.
love. No, I'm telling you something. People say how much they hate Americans. I don't know. I
They
never
don't.
had
Yeah,
that
they don't.
experience. Not at all. When I was there, anytime I was there, the circle of their friends couldn't wait to meet me. They'd come over. As a matter of fact, I'd be at their house, and every night someone new would come over, and you go through the spiel of where you're from, whatever. But it was it really, I don't know. It always brought tears to my eyes. When I left there, I always left with tears in my eyes because you're just down to earth, good, hardworking people. No one's got a ton of money. Matter of fact, one of my cousins got himself. He's on a pension. He gets like $1,500 a month. Okay, and they struggle. They really do. So before I left him a nice envelope with big fat stack of euros. I didn't tell him. I said, "Son, look, give it to your dad. I know we would take it if I handed it to him, but I'm going to be gone, and he's not going to refuse it." That's what I did. But and then I said to myself, I think Dad used to do that all the time. When he would go to Italy, he always had a stack of money. In those days, at lira, he always had a
Yeah,
stack of Italian money to hand out. But I don't know. I'm glad I was able to do it. I can do it, and I'll continue to do it if I have to. But for me, that was uh, 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 something that I consider a highlight of my life. Having gone back to Italy and I've made that connection. You know,
yeah, yeah. So before we go, tell people you said you have a Facebook group, right? And now is the book published? The book that you wrote,
It's
is that
published.
published?
It's on. You
Yeah.
can
So
get
why
it
don't you give
on.
us the details on all of that?
Yeah, the book is called "Follow Your Heart." It's and the reason how I came up with that name is it's from the girlfriend. Every time the main character Nico was indecisive about something, his girlfriend would always say, "Listen, Nico, follow your heart. What your heart tells you, that's the right thing to do." And this got him through the whole thing. And eventually, allowed him to propose to her marriage. So it's called Follow Your Heart. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble online. There's another site called Lulu, Lulu.com. You can get it on there as well. That's the publisher, and it's a very nice read. It's an easy read. It's under 200 pages. There's a lot of elements of culture and love, and especially if you're Italian, you'll say, "Hey, that's me. That's my grandfather. That's my grandmother." So I did it was a labor of love. It was COVID. There was I love to write. So I said, "Hey, I'm gonna write a book." So I checked off my bucket list. One of the things I wanted to do, and I did it. Actually, I'm in the midst of writing a second book. I'm better at it now, and I know how to go about doing it. So maybe by the end of the year, I'll have that done. Because you know what happens? Writing is, it's fleeting. You're inspired, and then you lose your inspiration, and you
Yeah.
just can't get it to come out, and then all of a sudden it comes back again. So you just can't sit down and write a book. You write pieces of it, and you put it all together, and you make it work. So that's it. It is available though.
And what's the Facebook group?
Oh, the Facebook group is called. My regular one is Fred Russo, and the other one is called "As I Was Saying" by Fred Russo. What I do is anything I write, I post on "As I Was Saying." So if anybody wants to follow me just for that basis alone, and not hear about all the dreadful things that I post otherwise, with other people, they can just go there and read the essays that I write.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And I'll put it on there and I'll put it on the blog so everybody can
Sure,
find it.
that'd be great.
Well, thanks again, Fred. Appreciate you taking the time.
Bob, thank you too. It was fun. I enjoyed this conversation.